The credit card statement arrived on a Tuesday, and with it, the end of everything Carrie Trent thought she knew about her life. She'd been sorting through mail at the kitchen counter, half listening to the rhythm of chopping from the restaurant downstairs, where her staff prepared for dinner service. The envelope was ordinary, the kind she'd opened 1,000 times before without thought. But when her eyes landed on the charge, Billionaire, the city's most exclusive restaurant, reservation deposit, her hands went cold. The paper trembled between her fingers as reality began to crack around her. Billionaire. The place Ricky James always said was overpriced and pretentious. The place he'd laughed about when she suggested celebrating their anniversary there, claiming he'd rather eat good food than pay for atmosphere. She could still hear his dismissive tone, the way he'd waved away her suggestion like it was childish. Yet here it was, a reservation for two, confirmed and paid, the date printed in stark black ink. Carrie set down the statement with exaggerated care, as if it might explode if handled roughly. She stared at the kitchen wall, at the paint her parents had chosen decades ago, faded now but still standing. Her mind raced through possibilities that all led to the same dark conclusion. Her husband of 17 years had booked a romantic dinner at the most intimate restaurant in the city, and he hadn't mentioned it to her once. Not one word, not one hint. She picked up her phone with shaking hands and scrolled through their recent messages. Nothing. No hint of a surprise, no playful secrecy, no anniversary she'd forgotten. Just the usual mundane exchanges about restaurant orders and whether they needed milk. Messages that were functional, transactional, devoid of anything resembling affection. Her finger hovered over his contact, the urge to call him immediate and overwhelming. But something stopped her. Some instinct that whispered if she called now, if she asked directly, he would lie. And she would believe him, because she'd spent nearly 2 decades believing him, training herself to accept his words as truth, even when her gut screamed otherwise. Instead, Carrie opened her laptop with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She had to set it down twice before she could steady herself enough to type. The Billionaire website loaded slowly, each image appearing like a revelation. Candlelight flickering across intimate booths, tables positioned for privacy, for whispered confessions and stolen glances. A menu that changed nightly based on the chef's inspiration, ingredients listed like poetry. The kind of place you took someone you wanted to impress, someone you were trying to seduce, someone who wasn't your wife of 17 years. Her chest tightened as she clicked on the reservations page, her breath coming short and fast. The earliest available slot was 3 months out, the calendar marked with red marks denoting fully booked evenings. But when she checked the date on their credit card statement, the reservation was for tomorrow evening. Tomorrow, while she would be working the dinner rush downstairs, managing the family restaurant her parents had built from nothing, sweating over stoves and solving staff problems. Ricky would be at Billionaire with someone else, laughing with someone else, touching someone else's hand across a candlelit table. Carrie's vision blurred, but she didn't cry. Tears would come later, she knew, in the dark hours when she was alone and could afford to fall apart. Right now, her hands were steady as she picked up the phone and dialed Billionaire's reservation line. The phone rang 3 times, each tone like a heartbeat in her ear. "Good afternoon, Billionaire. This is Gerard speaking. How may I assist you?" His voice was smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that belonged in expensive places. Carrie forced herself to speak calmly. "I'd like to make a reservation for tomorrow evening. 2 people. I'm terribly sorry, but we're fully booked for the next several months. I'd be happy to put you on our waiting list, or I can offer you an evening in... What if someone cancels? Do you have a table that might open up?" Carrie's voice was surprisingly steady, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Gerard's voice softened with professional sympathy. "It's unlikely, madam, but I can certainly note your information if something becomes available. May I have your name and contact information?" "Actually," Carrie said, each word deliberate, "I'm looking for a very specific table. The one right next to the reservation under Ricky James, tomorrow evening." There was a pause, heavy and telling. Carrie could hear papers rustling, the click of a computer mouse. I'm not sure I understand, madam. I understand perfectly, Gerard. My husband booked a table at your restaurant, and I'd like to book the one beside his. Surely you have tables next to each other. Small restaurant, intimate setting. I saw the photos on your website. I'll pay double your usual deposit. Ma'am, I don't think triple. I'll pay triple your deposit, and I'll add a generous tip for your discretion in this matter. All I'm asking for is the table next to my husband's reservation. Nothing more, nothing less. Another pause, longer this time, and Kerry could almost hear Gerard's mental calculations. Professional ethics versus a substantial tip. When his voice returned, it was quieter now, almost conspiratorial. The table adjacent to that reservation is actually available. It's our corner booth, usually reserved for special guests. Then I'm your special guest for tomorrow evening. Same time as his reservation? 7:30, yes. And may I say, madam, he hesitated, I hope tomorrow evening brings you the clarity you're seeking. Kerry almost laughed at the delicate phrasing. Thank you, Gerard. I appreciate your understanding. She provided her credit card information, a different card than the one she shared with Ricky, one he never looked at. The deposit went through with a confirming beep. When she hung up, her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. What was she doing? What did she think would happen? But she knew exactly what would happen. She'd sit at that table, elegant and composed, and she'd watch Ricky walk in with whoever he was betraying her for. She'd finally see the face of her replacement, the woman who'd stolen her husband's attention, his affection, his fidelity. The rest of the day passed in a fog that felt like moving underwater. Kerry moved through the restaurant's prep work mechanically, her hands performing familiar tasks while her mind spun in circles. She checked inventory without seeing the numbers, approved menu changes without tasting the samples. Bellamy Knox, her sous chef, asked twice if she was feeling well. You look pale, boss. Like you've seen a ghost. Kerry had wanted to laugh. She hadn't seen a ghost. She'd seen the future. I'm fine, Bellamy. Just tired. You sure? Because you just approved replacing your mother's signature pasta. It's fine. Everything's fine. But her voice cracked, betraying her. Kerry, please, Bellamy, not now. I just need to get through today. That evening, when Ricky came home, he kissed her cheek in the absent way he always did. His lips barely touched her skin. He tossed his keys on the counter and asked what was for dinner in the tone of someone asking about the weather. I thought we'd order something, Kerry said. I'm exhausted. Long day. He was already looking at his phone. The longest. He didn't ask why. He used to ask. Years ago, he would have pulled her into his arms, would have insisted on cooking for her. Now he just nodded and scrolled through delivery options. Kerry studied his face in the kitchen light. The face she'd woken up next to for 17 years. The face she'd kissed on their wedding day. The face that had smiled at her when they'd signed the lease on this building. When had that face become a stranger's? Ricky, she said. He looked up. Yeah? Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. His eyes widened, then narrowed. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Are you happy with us? With our life? But Kerry, I'm tired. Can we not do this right now? Do what? Have a conversation with my husband? He set his phone down hard. Where is this coming from? From me wondering if the man I married still exists, or if I've been living with an imposter. His jaw tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you really looked at me? When's the last time we talked about something that mattered? We talk every day. About restaurant orders and utility bills. That's not talking, Ricky. That's existing in the same space. For a moment, she thought he might say something real. She could see the war behind his eyes. But then his phone buzzed, and his eyes flicked down. Just for a second. Just long enough for Kerry to see his expression change. I'm ordering Thai, he said flatly. You want your usual? Kerry felt something inside her go cold and hard. Sure, my usual. They ate in silence, the television filling the space where conversation used to live. Kerry pushed pad thai around her plate and planned tomorrow evening. What would she wear? How would she keep her face neutral? Would she confront them in the restaurant? That night, lying in bed next to Ricky's sleeping form, Carrie stared at the ceiling and felt her marriage crumbling. She'd known something was wrong for months. The late nights, the new cologne, the way he angled his phone away. She'd known, but she'd convinced herself she was paranoid. But tomorrow her imagination would have a face. Tomorrow she would sit at the adjacent table and discover exactly who had stolen her husband. She would dress in her finest clothes and wear her brightest smile, and she would make them both suffer through the most excruciating dinner of their lives. Carrie rolled onto her side, away from Ricky, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, everything would change. Chapter 2. The Confrontation. Carrie stood in front of her closet the next evening, fingers trembling as she touched fabric of dresses she hadn't worn in years. Each one held a memory. The navy silk from their 10th anniversary, the emerald green from a party where Ricky had actually danced with her. Behind her, she could hear Ricky in the bathroom, humming tunelessly as he shaved, completely unaware that his carefully constructed lie was about to collapse. "You're really not going to tell me where we're going?" he'd asked that morning, and Carrie had heard the panic underneath his casual tone. "It's a surprise," she'd said, watching his face carefully. "Don't you trust me?" The irony of those words had tasted like poison on her tongue. Now she pulled out a deep burgundy dress, elegant and understated, the kind that made her feel powerful and invincible. She needed power tonight, needed armor against what was coming. Her hands shook as she zipped it up, the sound of the zipper teeth clicking together loud in the quiet bedroom. She pressed her palms flat against her thighs, forcing herself to breathe. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. The meditation technique her mother had taught her decades ago. "You look beautiful," Ricky said from the doorway, and Carrie almost laughed at the absurdity of it. He noticed now. Tonight, when he'd planned to be with someone else, he finally saw her. "Thank you," she managed, her voice steady despite everything breaking inside her like glass. The drive to Billionaire was torture stretched across 20 excruciating minutes. Ricky kept trying to guess where they were going, his voice getting tighter with each wrong suggestion. Carrie could see sweat beading on his temples despite the car's air conditioning. When Carrie pulled up to the valet stand, his face went absolutely white. Not pale, white, the color of bone. "Carrie, I don't think this place is really expensive. And we should have. I already made the reservation," she said, stepping out and handing the keys to the waiting attendant. "Come on." She walked toward the entrance without looking back, her heels clicking against the pavement with confidence that was pure performance. She trusted that his fear of making a scene would force him to follow. And he did, always 3 steps behind, his presence a weight pressing against her spine. The hostess greeted them with professional warmth. "Good evening. Name for your reservation?" "Trent," Carrie said clearly. "Gary Trent." If the hostess recognized the name from the adjacent reservation, she gave no indication. She simply smiled and gestured for them to follow. Carrie kept her eyes forward as they wound through the dimly lit restaurant, past tables where couples leaned close over candlelight, past the open kitchen where flames leaped and pans clanged in rhythmic chaos, and then they were there. Their table, and right beside it, separated by perhaps 3 feet and a decorative screen that did nothing to create actual privacy, was another table, empty, waiting, set for 2 with candles already lit. Carrie slid into her seat with deliberate grace, positioning herself so she had a clear view of both their table and the entrance. Ricky sat across from her, and she could see sweat beading at his temples despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. His hands were shaking slightly as he picked up his menu, not reading it, just staring at words without seeing them. "Carrie, why are we here?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Because," she said, accepting a menu from the server who'd appeared silently, "I thought it was time we experienced something new together." "Don't you think?" The server explained the evening's tasting menu, his voice a pleasant drone that Carrie only half heard. She nodded at appropriate moments, her smile never wavering, ordered the most expensive wine on the list, a bottle that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month, smiled at Ricky across the table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They'd been seated for perhaps 15 minutes when Kerry saw her. The woman who walked through Luminaire's entrance was stunning in a way that made Kerry's chest constrict. Tall, impossibly tall in heels that added inches to an already impressive frame. Impeccably dressed in a black cocktail dress that hugged curves Kerry had lost somewhere in 17 years of marriage. Her hair was styled in soft waves that probably took an hour to perfect, her makeup flawless. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. She was also scanning the restaurant with visible confusion, her phone clutched in one manicured hand. The hostess approached her, spoke quietly, and the woman's confusion deepened into something darker. Kerry watched as she was led directly to the table beside theirs. Watched as the woman's eyes landed on Ricky, watched as shock, then understanding, then fury crossed her beautiful face in rapid succession. "Kerry," Ricky whispered, his voice strangled. "Kerry, please what?" Kerry asked, her voice conversational as the woman sat down at the adjacent table stiffly, her back ramrod straight. "Please don't make a scene. Please pretend I don't see what's right in front of me. Which please did you have in mind exactly?" The woman at the next table was staring at her phone now, her fingers flying across the screen with furious energy. Texting Ricky, no doubt, demanding to know what the hell was happening, why he'd brought his wife to their romantic dinner. Kerry could see the woman's hands shaking, could see rage and humiliation warring on her face. Kerry leaned forward across the table, her voice low enough that only Ricky could hear. "Her name. Tell me her name right now. Kerry, not here, please, not here. Her name, Ricky, now. Or I will stand up and introduce myself. I will walk over to that table and say hello. My name is Kerry Trent, and I believe you're sleeping with my husband." His face crumpled like wet paper. Lisa Marie Carter. "And how long have you been with Lisa Marie Carter?" Please, goodish, how long?" 8 months. The admission came out broken. 8 months. Nearly a year of lies. Nearly a year of her cooking dinner while he texted another woman. Nearly a year of sleeping beside someone who was touching someone else. Nearly a year of making herself small while he made her a fool. Kerry sat back in her chair and picked up her wineglass with a hand that didn't shake. Her hand was perfectly steady as she raised it to her lips. "Well then, let's enjoy our meal, shall we? After all, you paid quite a lot for this experience." The dinner that followed was exquisite agony, every moment stretching into eternity. Kerry ordered course after course, each more elaborate than the last, performing the role of delighted diner with commitment. She asked the sommelier for pairing recommendations, nodding thoughtfully at his descriptions. She commented on the plating, the flavors dancing on her tongue. The ambiance that really was quite special, wasn't it, Ricky? She asked Ricky questions about the restaurant they owned together, about whether they should consider updating their own menu, about trivial things that meant nothing while the world burned. At the next table, Lisa Marie sat frozen, a beautiful statue carved from rage and humiliation. Her own food arrived and went untouched, the server returning twice to ask if everything was all right. She managed weak nods but never picked up her fork. Kerry could feel the other woman's eyes on her, could sense the rage radiating from that adjacent table like heat. Good, let her feel a fraction of what Kerry felt. Ricky barely touched his food, each course arriving and being removed mostly intact. He sat rigid in his chair, occasionally glancing at his phone when it buzzed insistently, his face a mask of misery. "You should answer her," Kerry said pleasantly, nodding toward his phone. "She seems distressed." "Kerry, please, can we just go home and talk about this?" "Why? We're having such a lovely time. Isn't this exactly the romantic evening you planned?" A couple at a nearby table glanced over, sensing tension. Kerry smiled at them warmly until they looked away uncomfortably. The server brought dessert, an architectural marvel of chocolate and gold leaf. Carrie took a bite, savoring the richness, and wondered when she'd lost the ability to taste anything except bitterness. "She's married too," Carrie said suddenly. "Isn't she?" "Lisa Marie Carter." I looked her up. Her husband teaches at the high school on Riverside. June Carter. He posts pictures of his students' accomplishments online. He seems like a good man. Does he know his wife is here? Ricky's hands were shaking now, his fork clattering against his plate. "Stop, please stop." "Why should I stop? I'm just making conversation." "That's what couples do at dinner, isn't it?" At the adjacent table, Lisa Marie stood abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor with a sound like a scream. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands, threw money on the table, and walked out without looking back. Carrie watched her go, watched the perfect posture crack as she fled, and felt nothing except cold satisfaction. "Are you happy now?" Ricky hissed. "Are you satisfied?" Carrie set down her fork very carefully. "Not even remotely." But the evening isn't over yet. She signaled for the check, paid with the card she'd used to book the reservation, and stood. Ricky scrambled to follow as she walked out with her head held high, past the other diners who were now openly watching, past the hostess who looked sympathetic, past the valet who handed over their car keys with studied neutrality. In the car, Ricky finally broke. "It's over with her. I swear to you, Carrie, it's over. It was a mistake, the worst mistake of my life. Please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can drive," Carrie said. "What?" I said drive. "I'm not having this conversation in a parking lot." Ricky drove with shaking hands, and Carrie stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. She thought confronting them would bring clarity. Instead, she just felt hollow. At home, Ricky followed her inside, still talking, still pleading. Carrie walked past him to the kitchen and poured herself water. Her hands were finally shaking now. "Tell me everything," she said. "And I mean everything. How you met, where you went, what you told her about me. Every single detail," so he told her. And with every word, Carrie felt the marriage she'd believed in dissolve like salt in water, until there was nothing left except betrayal and the knowledge that the man she'd loved no longer existed. Chapter 3. Unlikely Allies. Carrie didn't sleep that night. She lay in their daughter's old bedroom, the room she'd fled to after Ricky's confession finally ended somewhere around 3 in the morning. The walls were still covered with posters from high school, frozen in time like a museum display, a reminder of when life was simpler and love meant something uncomplicated. Ricky had stood in the hallway outside the door for over an hour, pleading through the wood until his voice went hoarse and cracked. "Carrie, please let me in. We can work through this," as if words could rebuild what actions had destroyed. Carrie had said nothing, just stared at the ceiling and listened to her marriage collapse in real time. When dawn finally came, grey light seeping through curtains her daughter had chosen a decade ago, she heard him leave for the restaurant, heard his footsteps pause outside her door one more time, a long silence where she imagined him pressing his hand against the wood, then continuing down the stairs with heavy steps. The front door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Carrie picked up her phone with hands that felt disconnected from her body and opened a new message to a number she'd found the night before. June Carter's contact information hadn't been hard to find. He had a modest presence online, mostly professional pages related to his teaching. His profile picture showed a man with kind eyes and a genuine smile, holding up a book like he was recommending it to the world. Carrie's fingers hovered over the keyboard. What did you say to a stranger whose life you were about to destroy? How did you tell someone their marriage was built on lies? Your wife is having an affair with my husband. We need to talk. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then sat staring at the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 dots appeared almost immediately, disappeared, appeared again. Then when and where? Just 4 words. No denial, no outrage, no confusion. Just weary acceptance that suggested he'd been waiting for confirmation. Kerry suggested a coffee shop across town, neutral territory where neither would be recognized. June agreed without hesitation, and they set a time for that afternoon. Kerry spent the intervening hours moving through her apartment like a ghost, unable to eat, unable to focus on anything except the clock's hands moving with agonizing slowness. The hours crawled by. Kerry showered, standing under water that was too hot, letting it redden her skin. She dressed in clothes that felt like costume. She drove to the coffee shop with her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. She arrived early and chose a corner booth, positioning herself so she could see the door. June Carter walked in exactly on time. He was taller than his picture suggested, with the slightly rumpled look of someone who cared more about substance than appearance. His jacket was worn at the elbows, his tie slightly askew. But his eyes were what Kerry noticed first. Kind eyes, yes, but also devastated eyes. Her own pain reflected back at her. He sat down across from her without preamble. "Tell me." So she did. Kerry laid out everything she knew, pulling up credit card statements on her phone with shaking hands, showing him dates and times. June produced his own phone, his calendar app showing all the evenings Lisa Marie had claimed to be at client dinners and networking events. They matched dates and times with the grim focus of detectives. "I've been such a fool," he said quietly, scrolling through months of documented lies. "I knew something was wrong. I felt it in my gut. But every time I tried to talk to her about it, she'd tell me I was being paranoid, that I was controlling, that I needed to trust her. She made me apologize for even asking where she'd been." His voice cracked. "She made me feel crazy for trusting my instincts." "That's what they do," Kerry said, her voice flat. "They make you doubt yourself, make you the villain for questioning them. It's manipulation." June looked up from his phone, and Kerry saw tears he was fighting to control. "We've been married for 15 years. 15 years of building a life together, of planning our future. I thought—" His voice broke completely. "I thought we were happy." "So did I. I spent 17 years thinking we were building something that mattered." They sat in silence for a moment. Two strangers connected by the worst thing that had ever happened to them, bound together by betrayal. The coffee shop hummed around them, ordinary people having ordinary days. Then June asked, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." "You confront her. Demand the truth, though I guess I already have it." He rubbed his face with both hands, pressing hard. "God, how do you confront someone about something like this?" "Directly," Kerry said, remembering last night. "That's what I did. I sat next to them at the restaurant and watched them squirm." June's eyes widened. "You were there? At their dinner?" "Oh, I booked the adjacent table. Made Ricky take me." Lisa Marie showed up expecting a romantic evening and got dinner theater instead. A laugh burst out of June, sharp and pained. "That's brilliant." "Brutal, but brilliant." "It didn't make me feel better," Kerry admitted. "I thought it would. I thought confronting them publicly would give me some sense of power back. But I just felt empty. I think that's what betrayal does. It hollows you out." Kerry studied him across the table, this man whose life paralleled hers in the worst possible way. "Can I ask you something? Did you see any signs?" June was quiet for a long moment. She started caring more about her appearance. Not for me, I realize now. For him. She'd spend hours getting ready for these work events, and when she'd come home, she'd be different, distant, like she'd left the best parts of herself somewhere else. He met Kerry's eyes. "What about you?" "Oh?" "Ricky stopped touching me. Not sexually, although that too, but all the small touches that make up a marriage. He'd come home and go straight to his phone. Instead of kissing me hello, he'd sit on the opposite end of the couch. He started sleeping facing away from me." Kerry's voice wavered. "The absence of touch tells you everything you need to know about a marriage." Lisa Marie kept finding reasons to go out. Always some client who needed attention, some emergency that required her immediate presence. And I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Because questioning her meant admitting our marriage might be failing. They talked for over an hour, trading stories and evidence, piecing together the architecture of their spouse's deception. The affair had been methodical, planned, not some impulsive mistake, but a sustained betrayal that required constant lying, constant choosing someone else over the person you'd promised forever. "I'm going to confront her tonight," June finally said. "I can't carry this around knowing what I know. Do you want me to send you everything I have? The evidence?" "Well, please. And Carrie?" He reached across the table and squeezed her hand briefly. "Thank you. For being brave enough to message me. For not letting me keep living in ignorance. We deserve the truth," Carrie said, "even when it destroys us." June left first, and Carrie sat alone in the booth staring at her cold coffee. She felt strange, sharing this intimate devastation with a stranger. But June wasn't really a stranger anymore. They were members of the same terrible club now. Her phone buzzed. "Ricky, where are you? We need to talk." Carrie typed back, "I talked to June Carter. He knows everything now." 3 dots appeared and disappeared multiple times before Ricky's response. "How could you do that? You're trying to destroy her marriage out of spite." Carrie's laugh was harsh. "I'm not the one who destroyed anything. You did that all by yourself." She drove home, and when she walked into the apartment, Ricky was waiting. His face was blotchy, his eyes red. "You had no right to contact her husband." Carrie set her purse down carefully. "I had every right. He deserves to know his wife is a liar, just like I deserve to know you are. This is different. This is vindictive. No, Ricky, this is consequences. Something you've clearly forgotten exists." He moved toward her, hands reaching out. "Carrie, please. We can still fix this. I don't want to save it. Tell me something. Did you love her?" The question caught him off guard. "What, Lisa Marie, did you love her? Or was she just convenient?" Ricky's mouth opened and closed. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Help me understand what was worth throwing away 17 years. "She made me feel alive again," he finally said, and those words cut deeper than anything else. "She was exciting, new. With her, I wasn't just the restaurant guy drowning in bills. I was interesting. And I made you boring." "No, that's exactly what you're saying." Carrie moved toward the hallway. "I'm sleeping in the spare room. Don't try to change that." "For how long?" Carrie turned back. "However long it takes for me to figure out if there's anything left worth saving." She closed the bedroom door and locked it. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself cry. Her phone buzzed after midnight. June. "I confronted her. You were right. She admitted everything. She's filing for divorce." Carrie typed back through tears. "Mine too. I'm so sorry." "Don't be. You gave me the truth." "Are you okay?" "No, are you?" "No, but maybe we will be." She fell asleep with her phone in her hand. Chapter 4. Separate Destruction. 3 weeks passed in a strange purgatory where time felt both frozen and accelerated. Carrie and Ricky moved around each other like ghosts occupying the same haunted house, their paths crossing but never truly connecting. They existed in the same physical space but lived in entirely separate realities. Carrie threw herself into the restaurant with an intensity that had her staff exchanging worried glances. She arrived before dawn to prep, her key turning in the lock while the city still slept. She didn't leave until after midnight, perfecting recipes that didn't need perfecting, reorganizing storage that was already organized. Anything to avoid going home. Bellamy Knox finally cornered her in the walk-in cooler on a Wednesday afternoon, the cold air making their breath visible. "Boss, you're scaring me. When's the last time you slept?" "Really slept?" "I'm fine, Bellamy." "You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground, and we both know it's not about the restaurant." Bellamy's voice softened. "Whatever's happening with Ricky, you don't have to handle it alone." Carrie felt her composure crack. "He cheated on me for months. With someone who made him feel less boring than I apparently do." "Oh, Carrie," Bellamy pulled her into a fierce hug. "That man is an absolute fool. I just don't understand what I did wrong. Where I failed him." Bellamy pulled back, holding Carrie by the shoulders. "Stop right there! You didn't fail, he did. He made a choice, and that choice has nothing to do with your worth. But Carrie couldn't shake the feeling that she'd somehow been inadequate. That if she'd been more exciting, more attentive, Ricky wouldn't have looked elsewhere. She'd been seeing a therapist, Dr. Helena Wright, twice a week now. Helena had gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a directness that Carrie appreciated. "You're looking for a reason that makes sense," Helena told her during their latest session. "But infidelity rarely makes sense to the person betrayed. It's not a logical equation. People cheat because of their own deficiencies, not yours. Then why does it feel like I wasn't enough?" Because that's easier than accepting that sometimes people just make selfish choices. If it was your fault, you could fix it. If it's his character flaw, you have no control. Helena leaned forward. Tell me something, Carrie. When did you stop writing down recipes? The question caught her off guard. What? You mentioned once that you used to keep a notebook of recipes, stories attached to food. When did you stop? Carrie had to think about it. Sometime after we opened the restaurant, I guess. There wasn't time anymore, or there wasn't space for it. Tell me about the cookbook you wanted to write. That was just a dream. Not realistic. Why not? Metidi. Because Ricky said it would distract from the restaurant. That we needed to focus on building the life we had instead of chasing fantasies. And what did you want? I wanted to travel to Italy and take cooking classes. I wanted to collect recipes from my grandmother before she died. I wanted to write about food as memory, as love, as the thing that connects us to our past. Carrie's voice broke. But that wasn't practical. So you made yourself smaller to fit his vision of what your life should be. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Carrie wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Helena was right. She'd spent years sublimating her dreams to Ricky's priorities. That evening, Carrie stopped at a bookstore and bought a new notebook. Not for the restaurant. For herself. She sat in her car and opened to the first page. Grandmother's Sunday gravy. The smell of this sauce simmering meant family, meant chaos, meant love so fierce it had to be fed. She'd started before church, letting it cook all day, and by the time we sat down to eat, the house smelled like coming home. Carrie wrote for an hour, words pouring out. When she finally looked up, her cheeks were wet, but she felt lighter. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is June. I hope it's okay that I got your number." I confronted Lisa Marie. She's filing for divorce. "How are you holding up?" Carrie stared at the message. She typed back, "I'm learning who I was before I made myself small." "How are you?" Devastated, relieved, angry, all of it at once. That sounds about right. Would you want to get coffee again? I could use someone who understands. Carrie hesitated only briefly. Tomorrow afternoon. Same place. I'll be there. When Carrie got home, Ricky was waiting with flowers. Red roses, her supposed favorite, though she'd told him years ago she preferred wildflowers. "I made reservations at that Italian place you like." "I thought we could talk." Carrie looked at the roses. "I'm not ready for that. When will you be ready? How long are you going to punish me?" "No, I'm not punishing you, Ricky. I'm protecting myself." "From what?" "I told you it's over with her. I'm here. I'm trying." "You're trying because you got caught. Not because you suddenly realize what you were risking." Carrie moved past him. "I'm meeting someone tomorrow. A friend." She saw suspicion flash across his face. "What friend?" "Well, June Carter." Ricky's face went red. "Her husband." "You're meeting with her husband?" "Yes. We're both dealing with the same thing." "This is inappropriate, Carrie. You're having an emotional affair." Carrie actually laughed. "That's rich coming from you. We're having coffee, Ricky. We're not sneaking around for 8 months. I don't like this. I don't particularly care what you like anymore. You lost that privilege." Carrie closed the bedroom door, leaving Ricky with his rejected roses. She texted June. "My husband accused me of having an emotional affair because we're meeting for coffee." "The irony is staggering." June's response came quickly. "Lisa Marie said the same thing. Apparently we're the ones being inappropriate. How dare we seek support? The audacity." Carrie found herself smiling for the first time in days. She fell asleep that night with her notebook on the nightstand, filled with one recipe and the promise of more. Chapter 5. Sanctuary. The coffee shop became their sanctuary over the following weeks, a neutral space that belonged to neither of their old lives. Carrie and June met there 3 times that first week, then almost daily, their schedules aligning like they'd been designed to intersect. They'd sit in the same corner booth and talk about everything and nothing. June told her about his students with enthusiasm that made his whole face light up, transforming him from tired to animated. The ones who made teaching worthwhile, who suddenly understood metaphor. The ones who broke his heart, bright kids trapped in terrible circumstances. Carrie talked about her parents' restaurant, how it had been her inheritance and her prison. "I loved it once," she admitted one afternoon, stirring sugar into her 3rd cup of coffee. "When it was my parents, it felt magical. My mother would let me experiment in the kitchen, would encourage every creative impulse. But after they died and Ricky and I took over, it became this thing we had to maintain. A legacy I couldn't fail. So you stopped creating and started preserving." "Exactly. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until it was already done." June nodded thoughtfully. "Lisa Marie used to encourage my writing. When we first met, she'd read everything I wrote and tell me I had talent. But somewhere along the way, she started calling it a hobby, started suggesting I focus on things with more practical applications." He smiled sadly. "I haven't written anything except lesson plans in years. What would you write about if you started again?" "Honestly, probably this. The strange fellowship of betrayal. How 2 strangers can understand each other better than the people they've known for decades." Carrie felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she hadn't experienced in months. "That's beautiful. You should write it." "Maybe I will." "What about you? What's the first recipe you'd put in your cookbook?" "My grandmother's Sunday gravy. The one that makes the whole house smell like home." "Then write that one first. Start building the book you've always wanted to create." It should have felt strange, this easy intimacy with someone she'd known for such a short time. But June made sense to her in ways Ricky hadn't in years. They spoke the same language of loss and understood each other's pain without judgment. One evening, they decided to take a walk instead of sitting in the coffee shop. The botanical gardens were open late for a special exhibit, and the paths wound through displays of autumn flowers blazing in the fading light. "Can I tell you something?" June asked as they walked. "Lisa Marie served me with divorce papers yesterday." Carrie stopped walking. "How do you feel?" "Like I should be more upset than I am. Like there's something wrong with me, because mostly I just feel relieved." "That's not wrong. That's honest." June turned to face her, and in the golden hour light, Carrie noticed details she'd been too devastated to see before. The silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. The way he looked at her like she was someone worth seeing. "Carrie, I need to tell you something, and I hope it doesn't make things weird between us." Her heart started beating faster. "Okay, you've become the best part of my days. I wake up thinking about what we'll talk about. I go to sleep replaying our conversations. And I know the timing is terrible. I know we're both still technically married and devastated and healing, but I needed you to know that you matter to me. A lot." Carrie felt tears spring to her eyes. "June, You don't have to say anything back. I just needed to be honest because I've spent too long being married to dishonesty, and I won't do that again. Not even with myself." "I feel the same way," Carrie whispered. "And it terrifies me. What if I'm just replacing one relationship with another? What if this is just rebound? What if we're both so damaged that we can't see clearly? Then we'll figure it out together, as friends if that's all you want. But I won't lie to you about what I feel." They stood there in the botanical gardens as the sun set, neither moving closer, but both feeling the magnetic pull between them. Finally, Carrie said, "Let's take this slowly. Neither of us is divorced yet. Neither of us is ready for anything serious. But I want you in my life, June, whatever that looks like. Slow works for me. I'm not going anywhere." They finished their walk and June drove her back to her car. Before she got out, he reached over and squeezed her hand. Just that simple touch sent electricity through her entire body. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. "For really seeing me." Always. Carrie drove home with her heart lighter than it had been in months. But when she walked into the apartment, Ricky was waiting with a face like a thunderstorm. "Where have you been?" "Out walking with June. It's almost 10. You've been out for over 3 hours. Your point?" "My point is that you're spending all your time with another man while your husband is here trying to save your marriage." Carrie set her purse down carefully. "Our marriage doesn't need saving, Ricky. It needs a funeral. You killed it 8 months ago when you decided Lisa Marie Carter was worth more than I was. That's not fair. I'm trying here. I'm doing everything you asked. I never asked you to do anything except be faithful. That should have been the baseline, not an achievement. So what, you're just giving up? Throwing away 17 years? You threw them away. I'm just acknowledging what you already did." Ricky's face twisted with rage. "This is about him, isn't it? About June Carter. You're punishing me by flaunting your relationship with him. My friendship with June has nothing to do with you. It exists because he understands what I'm going through in a way you never could. He's a boring high school teacher who couldn't keep his wife interested enough to stay faithful. What could he possibly offer you?" The casual cruelty of that statement took Carrie's breath away. "Get out." "What?" "Get out of my sight. Sleep somewhere else tonight, because if I have to look at you for one more second, I will say things I can't take back. This is my home too. It's my family's restaurant, my parents' legacy, my inheritance, and right now I want you out of it." Ricky grabbed his wallet and keys, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Carrie stood in the sudden silence and didn't feel victorious. She just felt tired. Her phone buzzed. "June. Did you make it home okay?" Carrie typed back, "Home, yes." "Okay, questionable. Ricky and I just had a massive fight. He called you boring. I am boring. I teach Hemingway to teenagers and get excited about properly cited bibliography." Despite everything, Carrie smiled. "He meant it as an insult. I'd rather be boring and faithful than exciting and a liar." "How are you, really?" Carrie sat down on the couch. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I can't do this anymore." "Good. You deserve better than someone who makes you feel small." "So do you. Then we'll both get better." Starting now. Carrie fell asleep on the couch that night, her phone still in her hand, and dreamed of botanical gardens and gentle hands and a life that might exist on the other side of this devastation. Chapter 6. Legal Warfare. Carrie's divorce lawyer, Octavia Russo, was a shark in expensive heels and a perfectly tailored suit. She listened to Carrie's story with a face that gave nothing away, taking notes in precise handwriting. Then she leaned back in her leather chair and smiled, and that smile was all teeth. "We're going to destroy him. Legally speaking, of course. I don't want to destroy him. I just want out. I want my life back." "Oh, honey, wanting out and getting out fairly are two different things. Especially when the family restaurant is involved, especially when inheritance and legacy are at stake." Octavia pulled up a legal pad, her pen poised like a weapon. "Tell me about the restaurant's ownership structure. Every detail matters here." Carrie explained how her parents had left the restaurant entirely to her in their will, a gift meant to honor her passion. But she'd added Ricky to the paperwork after they married, swept up in romantic notions. It had seemed right at the time. Now it just felt devastatingly stupid. "We'll need to prove that his affair not only violated your marriage, but also impacted the restaurant's operations and your inheritance." "Were there any instances where he used restaurant funds for his affair? Any money that should have gone to operations?" Carrie pulled out the credit card statements she'd been collecting with obsessive focus. Octavia's smile grew wider with each page, satisfaction radiating from her. "Dinners at expensive restaurants, hotels downtown and in neighboring cities, gifts that couldn't possibly be for you based on the stores. All charged to the restaurant's card, which means all taken from your inheritance." She looked up, her eyes bright. "This is embezzlement, Carrie. He stole from your family's legacy to fund his infidelity. This changes everything. Can we really use that? Is it really that serious?" "We can and we will. I'm also going to depose Lisa Marie Carter. Her testimony about the affair's timeline will be crucial, and if she tries to lie, we have the evidence to destroy her credibility." Octavia's voice was clinical, discussing human devastation like chess moves. "This won't be pleasant for anyone, but you'll come out of this with what's rightfully yours." Over the next month, the divorce became a war with casualties and collateral damage. Ricky's lawyer painted Kerry as an unforgiving wife who'd refused to work on the marriage after Ricky's one mistake. They claimed she'd abandoned the marriage first by moving into the spare bedroom, that her friendship with June Carter constituted emotional infidelity that justified Ricky's affair. Octavia tore those arguments apart systematically, with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a general. She presented the credit card evidence, showing months of calculated betrayal. She brought in staff from the restaurant who testified about Ricky's absences and Kerry's exhaustive efforts to keep things running alone. She had Lisa Marie deposed, and the other woman's testimony confirmed every sordid detail. The most damaging evidence came when Octavia proved Ricky had been siphoning money from the restaurant's account to fund his affair. Money that rightfully belonged to Kerry's inheritance from her parents. The judge's expression during that revelation was stone-cold fury. Ricky's face crumpled when the evidence was presented. Even his lawyer looked disgusted. "This changes everything," Octavia told Kerry after the hearing. "He's not getting a cent from the restaurant. We might even pursue criminal charges for embezzlement." But Kerry felt no triumph. Just exhaustion and sadness for the man she'd married, who'd become someone she didn't recognize. June's divorce was moving faster. Lisa Marie wanted it done quickly to move on with her life. She was already dating someone new from her firm, flaunting the relationship on social media before the papers were even signed. "Does it bother you?" Kerry asked him one evening at his house, a modest craftsman he'd spent years renovating himself. "Honestly, I'm grateful. Her obvious happiness elsewhere makes my case stronger. My lawyer is arguing that she abandoned the marriage, not me." They were sitting on his couch, a respectable distance between them. They'd been careful about physical contact, both aware of how it would look. But Kerry was hyper-aware of his presence, of the way her body leaned toward his, without permission. "Can I tell you something?" June asked. "Always. I started writing again. Real writing, not just lesson plans. I'm working on a novel." Kerry's face lit up. "June, that's wonderful. What's it about?" "A man whose life falls apart and discovers that sometimes destruction is just making space for something better. It's probably too autobiographical to be good, but it feels right. I'd like to read it. When you're ready. You're my first reader, obviously." He paused. "What about you? How's the cookbook coming?" Kerry pulled out her phone and showed him photos of the notebook that was now half filled with recipes and stories. "I'm actually thinking about submitting it to publishers. Not major ones, but small presses that focus on culinary memoirs." "Kerry, that's incredible. You have to do it. I'm scared. What if it's not good enough?" "What if it's better than you ever imagined?" June reached over and took her hand, the first time they'd intentionally touched in weeks. "You're brilliant, Kerry. Your writing makes me hungry and nostalgic for things I've never experienced. That's a gift." His hand in hers felt like coming home. Kerry looked at their intertwined fingers and felt something break open in her chest. "I'm falling for you. I know I shouldn't be. I know we should wait until everything is final and we've both healed more. But I need you to know that this isn't just friendship for me anymore." June's thumb stroked the back of her hand. "It hasn't been just friendship for me since the botanical gardens. Maybe since before that. I've been trying to be patient, trying to do the right thing. But Kerry, I think about you constantly. I dream about a future where we're both free and we can see where this goes. What if we crash and burn? What if we're just two broken people who'll break each other more? Then we'll heal together, but I don't think that's what this is. I think we found each other at the exact moment we both needed someone who understood. That's not coincidence. That's fate. Carrie leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. They sat like that for a long time, not kissing, not rushing, just being together in the quiet certainty that whatever was building between them was real. When Carrie finally went home that night, Ricky was there. He'd been drinking and his eyes were red-rimmed. I saw your car at his house. You were there for hours. Yes, I was. Are you sleeping with him? No, not that it's any of your business anymore. It's my business if my wife is with another man. I'm not your wife in any way that matters. We're just two people waiting for paperwork to make official what you already destroyed. Ricky slumped against the wall. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to fall for her, but you did. And you kept choosing her over me, over our marriage, over everything we built. So don't stand here now and act like you're the victim. I lost everything. The restaurant, you, my reputation. Was it worth it? Carrie looked at him, really looked at the man who'd betrayed her, and felt something she hadn't expected. Pity. That's a question only you can answer. But for me, losing you was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it let me find myself again, and it let me find someone who sees me as something other than convenient. She walked past him to the bedroom, and this time when she closed the door it felt final. Chapter 7. Freedom. 6 months after filing for divorce, Carrie stood in her lawyer's office and signed the final papers. Octavia watched with satisfaction as Carrie initialed each page, the pen scratching across paper with finality. The restaurant is entirely yours again. Ricky gets nothing from it. The house is yours. He has to pay you back the money he embezzled with interest. This is about as good as divorce gets. Carrie set down the pen and waited to feel something. Relief, victory, anything. But she just felt tired, wrung out, like she'd run a marathon and crossed the finish line without energy to celebrate. Thank you, Octavia, for everything. Thank you for being a client who actually listened to her lawyer. You'd be amazed how many people let their emotions tank their settlements. Octavia stood and offered her hand. Good luck, Carrie. I hope you find happiness. I think I already have, Carrie said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Carrie walked out of the lawyer's office a divorced woman and sat in her car for a long moment, just breathing. The signed papers sat on the passenger seat like evidence of a crime, or maybe evidence of freedom. She wasn't sure which yet. She drove straight to the cemetery where her parents were buried. The grass was overgrown around their headstones, and Carrie made a mental note to call the groundskeeper. She sat on the grass between their graves and told them everything. About Ricky's betrayal, about fighting for the restaurant, about meeting June and rediscovering who she was before marriage made her small. I wish you could meet him, she said to her mother's headstone. June, he's a teacher and he's kind and he makes me laugh. He reminds me of Dad, actually. The way he listens like what I'm saying actually matters. The way he supports my dreams instead of dismissing them. A breeze rustled through the trees, and Carrie imagined it was her mother's approval. I'm going to make you proud, she whispered. I'm going to turn the restaurant into something that honors what you built. Not just maintain it, but evolve it. And I'm going to write that cookbook you always said I should write. The one about food and memory and family. I'm going to live big again, Mom. The way you always wanted me to. Her phone rang. June. It's done. Officially divorced as of an hour ago. How do you feel? Free, terrified, ready, all of it at once. He paused. Can I take you to dinner tonight? A real date now that we can? Carrie smiled through sudden tears. I'd love that. Where? It's a surprise. But wear something you feel beautiful in. That evening, June picked her up at exactly 7. He was wearing a suit Carrie had never seen before, navy blue that made his eyes look impossibly warm. He handed her a single daisy, remembering what she'd said months ago about preferring wildflowers to roses. You remembered, she said, her voice catching. I remember everything you tell me. Carrie, He drove them to a small Italian restaurant across town. Not fancy, just authentic, the kind of place her parents would have loved. The owner greeted them warmly, and Kerry realized June had called ahead, had explained it was a special occasion. They sat across from each other at a corner table, and Kerry realized this was the first real date she'd been on in nearly 2 decades. The first time she'd sat across from someone who chose her without obligation or history weighing everything down. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "Isn't that ridiculous? We've spent hours together, but this feels different, because it is different. Before, we were 2 people supporting each other through trauma. Now we get to discover who we are without the weight of our marriages crushing us. We get to just be." The server brought wine, and June raised his glass. His hand was steady, but Kerry could see emotion swimming in his eyes. To new beginnings, to second chances, to finding each other at exactly the right moment. Kerry clinked her glass against his. To being brave enough to start over, and to trusting that the second time can be better than the first. The dinner was perfect. They talked and laughed and shared food the way couples do when everything is still new and exciting. June told her stories about his students that had her laughing until tears ran down her face. Kerry described her plans for updating the restaurant's menu, bringing in seasonal ingredients her mother used to champion. "I want to honor what my parents built while making it mine," she explained. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. That's what I'm trying to do with teaching. Honor the classics while making literature relevant to kids who've never known a world without smartphones." When June reached across the table and took her hand, Kerry felt her heart race like she was 16 again. His thumb traced circles on her palm, and such a simple touch shouldn't have affected her so deeply, but it did. "Can I tell you something I've been wanting to say for months?" June asked. "Please. I love you. I'm completely in love with you. And I know it's fast. I know we should probably wait and be more cautious, but I don't want to waste any more time not telling you the truth about how I feel." Kerry felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I love you too. I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. Scared that feeling this much for someone again meant I could be hurt this badly again. I can't promise I'll never hurt you, but I can promise I'll never lie to you, never cheat on you, never make you feel small or boring or like you're not enough. Can I kiss you?" Finally, June's smile was radiant. "I thought you'd never ask." June stood and came around to her side of the table. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her softly, tenderly, like she was something precious he'd been waiting his whole life to hold. Kerry kissed him back and tasted possibility, tasted a future she'd thought was lost forever. When they finally broke apart, the entire restaurant was watching them. An older couple at the next table started clapping, and soon the whole room erupted in applause. Kerry buried her face in June's shoulder, laughing and crying at the same time. "I think we just became that couple," June whispered. "The ones making a scene. I don't care. Let them watch. Let them see what real love looks like after everything else burns down." They left the restaurant hand in hand and walked through the city streets, talking about everything and nothing. They talked about their hopes and dreams, about June's novel that was now halfway done, and Kerry's cookbook proposal that she'd finally submitted to a small press. They talked about taking things slow, even though they'd already fallen completely. June stopped under a streetlight and turned to face her fully. "Move in with me." "June, I know it's fast, but I'm tired of ending every evening by taking you home. I want to wake up next to you. I want to make breakfast together and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want all the mundane, beautiful things that make up a life." Kerry stopped walking. "Are you sure? What if we rush this and ruin it?" "We won't. We've both already survived the worst. We know what we don't want, which means we can build exactly what we do want. And I want to build a life with you, Kerry. Not someday. Now." Kerry thought about her apartment above the restaurant, the place where her marriage had died. thought about June's house with its renovated kitchen and cozy reading nooks and garden he tended with the same care he brought to everything. Thought about waking up to gentle hands and honest conversation. "Yes, I'll move in with you." June lifted her off the ground and spun her around right there on the sidewalk, both of them laughing like fools. A passing couple smiled at them, and Carrie realized they must look ridiculous and didn't care at all. But that night, when Carrie got home to pack some things, she found Ricky waiting in the restaurant's dining room. He'd let himself in with a key he was supposed to have returned. "I heard you're seeing him openly now." "The teacher. His name is June, and yes, we're together, officially." "How long were you waiting? How long were you planning this before our divorce was even final?" Carrie felt anger rise hot in her chest. Don't you dare accuse me of anything when you're the one who destroyed our marriage. June and I didn't even hold hands until after I filed for divorce. We did everything right. It doesn't feel right. It feels like you replaced me." "I didn't replace you, Ricky. I found someone who actually values me." "There's a difference." Carrie moved toward the door. "You need to leave. This is my restaurant and you're trespassing. This used to be ours. It was never ours. It was always mine, inherited from my parents. You were just allowed to be part of it. And you threw that away when you decided you needed something more exciting than our life together." Ricky's face crumpled. "I'm sorry, Carrie. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. I'm sorry for everything. I know you are. But sorry doesn't change what happened. Sorry doesn't give me back the years I wasted making myself small enough to fit your vision. Sorry doesn't undo the betrayal." Carrie softened slightly, seeing him not as the man who'd hurt her, but as someone lost and struggling. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Ricky. I really do. But it's not me, and it never will be again." She walked out of the restaurant, leaving her ex-husband alone with the ghost of their marriage, and drove to June's house, where the lights were on and waiting. The porch light created a warm pool of yellow that felt like home. June opened the door before she could knock, pulling her inside and into his arms. "Are you okay?" "I am now. Take me to bed." "Not for anything except sleep. I just want to be held." So they went to bed, and June held her while she cried for everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained. He didn't try to fix it or tell her to stop, just held her and let her feel everything she needed to feel. And when she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of mornings where someone kissed her awake and evenings where conversation mattered more than silence. She dreamed of a kitchen filled with laughter and a life built on honesty instead of lies. Chapter 8. Building New. Carrie moved into June's house on a sunny Saturday in October, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Her possessions were surprisingly few after 17 years of marriage. Most of the furniture in the apartment had been Ricky's choices anyway, and she found she didn't want reminders. She brought her clothes, her cookbook notes, her parents' recipe box, her grandmother's cast-iron skillet that had survived 3 generations, and little else. June had cleared half his closet and 3 dresser drawers for her things. Such a small gesture, but it meant everything. "This is our space now," he said, watching Carrie hang up her dresses. "Equally ours. You change anything you want. Bring anything that makes you feel at home." Carrie turned and kissed him. "You make me feel at home. Everything else is just decoration." The first week was an adjustment. They learned each other's morning routines, discovered that Carrie was an early riser who liked quiet mornings with coffee, and June preferred to stay up late reading. They negotiated closet space and bathroom schedules, learned that Carrie squeezed toothpaste from the bottom and June from the middle, and decided it didn't matter enough to fight about. They settled into domesticity with surprising ease after that initial adjustment. June made coffee every morning while Carrie cooked breakfast, usually eggs and toast, sometimes pancakes on weekends. They'd eat together on the back porch, talking about their days ahead. June would head to school, and Carrie would go to the restaurant. They'd text throughout the day, silly messages and photos and reminders that they were thinking of each other. One afternoon, June surprised her at the restaurant during his lunch break. "I was nearby and wanted to see you," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "Is that okay?" "More than okay," Carrie said, introducing him to the staff properly for the first time. Bellamy sized him up with the protective scrutiny of a mother bear. "So you're the one who's got our boss smiling again," Bellamy said. "I'm trying my best," June replied with his gentle humor. "Keep it up." She deserves happy. Evenings were for cooking together, for reading side by side on the couch, for the quiet comfort of just existing in the same space. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with patience and tenderness. Every touch felt revelatory, every kiss a promise. Carrie marveled at how different intimacy felt with someone who actually saw her, who found her beautiful, not despite her flaws, but including them. "I love your laugh lines," June said one night, tracing them with his finger. "They tell me you've lived a full life." "I love your reading glasses," Carrie replied. "The way you peer over them like a professor. It's adorable." Carrie's cookbook proposal was accepted by a small culinary press in November. The editor, a kind woman named Patricia, who'd spent 30 years in food publishing, called with the news on a Wednesday afternoon. "We love your voice. The way you weave story and recipe together is exactly what we're looking for. It's not just a cookbook, it's a memoir that happens to include recipes. That's the sweet spot right now." Carrie had laughed and cried at the same time. "Can you really? You really want to publish it?" "Absolutely. Can you have a full manuscript ready in 6 months? I know it's aggressive, but I want to get this into our spring catalogue." "Yes, absolutely yes." She'd run into the restaurant kitchen where Bellamy was prepping for dinner service. "They want my cookbook. Someone actually wants to publish it." Bellamy had whooped and hugged her, lifting her off the ground. The whole staff celebrated between courses that evening, toasting with cooking wine and sharing stories about their own grandmother's recipes. When Carrie got home, June had champagne waiting and dinner already made, her favorite pasta carbonara. "To my brilliant girlfriend, the published author. It's not published yet. I still have to write most of it. You'll write it and it'll be amazing, and I'll buy 100 copies to give to everyone I know. My students are going to be so jealous that I'm dating a real author. You're writing a novel. You're a real author too. Not until someone publishes it. Right now I'm just a guy with a very long Word document." June's novel was progressing steadily. He'd wake up early to write before school. The tap of his laptop keys, a comforting sound that Carrie fell asleep to on the couch more than once. He let her read chapters as he finished them, and Carrie was amazed by his talent. The story was raw and honest, about grief and betrayal, and finding unexpected love in the ruins of a life. "This is beautiful," she told him after reading a particularly emotional chapter where the protagonist finally forgives his ex-wife. "This is publishable, June, really publishable. This could be big." "You think so?" "I know so. You need to query agents when you're done. I've been researching the process for my own book, and I can help you put together a query package." One Saturday, June took Carrie to meet his father, who lived in a retirement community an hour away. The old man was sharp despite his 83 years, with June's same kind eyes and dry humor. "So you're the woman who's got my son writing again," he said, shaking Carrie's hand firmly. "About time. He's been wasting that English degree teaching grammar to teenagers who don't care." "Dad," June protested, but he was smiling. "It's true. You were supposed to be the next Hemingway, and instead you're explaining symbolism to kids who think books are boring. Teaching matters too." "Of course it does. But so does writing your own stories." His father turned to Carrie. "Make sure he finishes that novel. He's been talking about writing one since he was 25. "I will," Carrie promised. They were happy, genuinely, surprisingly happy. Carrie's daughter came home for a visit during Christmas break and was initially skeptical of June, protective of her mother after everything that had happened. But he won her over with patience and genuine interest in her life, never trying to replace her father, but carving out his own space in their family. He asked her about her graduate program, actually listened to her answers, and offered insights about teaching that helped with her own work as a teaching assistant. He made her mother laugh in ways she hadn't heard in years. "He's good for you, Mom," her daughter said on her last night home, the two of them doing dishes while June read in the living room. "I haven't seen you this alive in years, maybe ever. He sees me, really sees me. Your father loved who he wanted me to be. June loves who I actually am." But her daughter looked troubled. "What about Dad? Have you talked to him?" "Not since the divorce was final." "Why, he's been calling me. A lot. He sounds really lost, Mom. I know what he did was terrible, but he's still my dad." Kerry pulled her daughter into a hug. "I know, sweetie, and it's okay to love him despite what happened. He's allowed to be lost. That's a consequence of his choices. But I can't be the one to find him. That's not my responsibility anymore. I know. I just worry about him." "That's because you have a good heart. But his healing is his responsibility, not yours. And definitely not mine. The best thing I can do for him is live my own life fully and show him that we both can survive this." After her daughter left, Kerry felt unsettled. She didn't want Ricky to be miserable, but she also couldn't save him from the consequences of his actions. She told June about the conversation that night as they cleaned up dinner. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, drying the plate she handed him. "Guilty, which is ridiculous because I shouldn't feel guilty for moving on. You're allowed to feel guilty and still know you made the right choice. Emotions aren't logical. They just are. How do you feel about Lisa Marie? Do you think about her?" June was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes. Usually when I'm editing something in my novel that involves the ex-wife character. But it's more like thinking about a stranger I used to know. The woman I married doesn't exist anymore, or maybe she never did. I invented this person I thought she was, and the real Lisa Marie was always someone else." Kerry understood that completely. She'd invented a version of Ricky too, had convinced herself he was faithful and devoted when the reality was so different. One evening in early February, Lisa Marie showed up at June's door, unannounced. Kerry answered, and the two women stared at each other for a long moment. Lisa Marie looked terrible, thinner, haggard, her confident glow entirely gone. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Is June here?" she asked. "He's at school. Parent-teacher conferences." "Oh, right." Lisa Marie looked past Kerry into the house, seeing the changes Kerry had made. New curtains, different artwork on the walls. "This place looks good." "He finally finished the kitchen remodel. Can I help you with something?" "I wanted to apologize. To both of you. I know it's too late, and I know you have no reason to forgive me, but I needed to say it. I destroyed 2 marriages because I was selfish and stupid and scared of being ordinary." Kerry felt no satisfaction in Lisa Marie's misery, just weary sympathy for someone who'd made terrible choices and was living with the consequences. "Thank you for saying that. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. I'm in therapy now, 3 times a week, trying to figure out why I keep sabotaging my own life. My therapist says I have attachment issues stemming from childhood abandonment." Sounds like a cliché, doesn't it? It sounds like you're doing the work. "That's good. Are you happy?" "With June?" Kerry didn't hesitate. "Yes, very happy." "Good. He deserves that. He's a good man. Better than I ever appreciated." Lisa Marie turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you found each other. At least something good came from all the pain we caused." Kerry watched her walk away and felt something shift inside her. She'd been carrying so much anger toward Lisa Marie, but now she just felt sad for her. When June came home, she told him about the visit. He listened quietly, then said, "Do you think she meant it? The apology?" "I think so. I think she's finally dealing with her issues instead of running from them. Does it change anything for you? Make you feel differently about what happened?" Kerry thought about it. "Not about what happened. That's still a betrayal that can't be undone. But it makes me feel differently about her. Less like she's a villain and more like she's just someone who made terrible choices for complicated reasons." "That's very generous of you." "It's not generosity. It's just exhaustion. I'm tired of being angry. I want to focus on what we're building instead of what was destroyed." June pulled her close, and they stood in the kitchen of their shared home, holding each other while dinner simmered on the stove, and the evening light turned everything golden. Outside, the first buds were appearing on trees, spring promising renewal after a long winter. Chapter 9. The Crisis. 3 years passed in what felt like rapid succession, time moving faster now that Carey was actually living instead of just surviving. June was deep into writing his novel, the pages accumulating steadily into something substantial and real, and Carey's cookbook was in final edits before publication, the manuscript polished and ready. Patricia had called 3 times that week alone, with excited updates about pre-orders and book tour possibilities. They'd moved in together, merging their lives with deliberate care and open communication. Everything seemed stable, settled, the kind of peaceful that made Carey occasionally hold her breath, waiting for something to shatter it. The call came on a Tuesday evening in late April, spring blooming outside, but winter returning in Carey's chest. Her daughter's voice was thick with tears that Carey could hear before words formed. "Mom, I'm pregnant, and Jake left me. He packed his stuff while I was at work and left. There's a note saying he's not ready to be a father, that this wasn't the plan, that he needs space to figure out his life. I'm terrified and I don't know what to do." Carey's world tilted, but her voice was steady. "I'm coming to you. June and I are getting on a plane tomorrow. First thing, pack a bag for a few days, because you're not dealing with this alone. You don't have to." "Yes, I do. You're my baby, and you need me. We'll figure this out together." June didn't hesitate when she told him, already pulling up flight information on his phone before she finished explaining. "Of course we're going. I'll call in for a substitute tomorrow and get coverage for the rest of the week." They spent 2 weeks with Carey's daughter in her small apartment 3 states away, helping her navigate her options and providing unconditional support without judgment. They held her while she cried, made sure she ate when grief stole her appetite, attended the doctor's appointment, where they first heard the baby's heartbeat, and Carey cried harder than her daughter. Carey watched June with her daughter and saw a side of him she hadn't experienced yet, patient and kind, offering wisdom without imposing it, making her daughter laugh when everything felt impossible and insurmountable. He helped her research parenting books, set up her first prenatal vitamin subscription, and listened when she needed to rage about Jake's cowardice. "I'm keeping the baby," her daughter finally decided, after days of weighing every possibility, consulting friends and therapists and her own heart. "And I'm moving home, back to your city. I can't do this alone, and I don't want to try. My lease is up in 2 months anyway. You won't be alone. We'll figure it out together." They flew home and immediately transformed June's guest room into a nursery, painting walls in soft yellows because her daughter didn't want to know the gender. June assembled furniture that came with incomprehensible instructions, while Carey picked out bedding and tiny clothes that made her cry. They were having a baby. Not her baby, but still. Carey threw herself into preparing for her daughter's arrival, juggling the restaurant where they were training a new sous chef to handle more responsibility, her cookbook deadline that was approaching fast like a train, her daughter's needs as she packed up her life 3 states away, and trying to maintain her relationship with June. She was sleeping 4 hours a night, running on coffee and adrenaline and the desperate need to fix everything she felt she'd broken years ago when her marriage fell apart. The cracks started showing after her daughter moved in with a U-Haul full of belongings and a belly that was just beginning to show, a small bump that would grow into a person. Carey became obsessed with being the perfect mother and future grandmother, trying to compensate for all the years her daughter had endured a broken family during the divorce. The fighting, the tension, the uncertainty. She worked herself to exhaustion, snapping at June when he tried to help, pushing him away when he suggested she slow down and delegate some responsibilities. She couldn't delegate being a mother. couldn't outsource fixing the damage she felt responsible for. "I can handle it," she'd insist, even as dark circles bloomed under her eyes like bruises, and she forgot to eat more often than she remembered, surviving on coffee and adrenaline and sheer stubborn will. Their communication broke down gradually, then all at once, like a dam giving way. June felt shut out of decisions about their own home, coming back from school to find furniture rearranged and schedules changed without consultation. Kerry felt overwhelmed and resentful that he didn't seem to understand the pressure she was under, the weight of trying to fix everything she felt she'd broken years ago. They started arguing about small things that represented bigger issues lurking beneath. Who forgot to buy milk? Whose turn it was to do laundry? Whether they should have guests over when Kerry's daughter needed quiet. 6 weeks after her daughter moved in, they had their first real fight that went beyond minor disagreements. Kerry had made a doctor's appointment for her daughter without consulting June about his schedule, and he'd had to cancel an important parent-teacher meeting to be available if they needed him. "You could have asked me first," June said, his voice tight with frustration he'd been swallowing for weeks. "I have responsibilities too. I have students and parents who depend on me. I had to reschedule 3 different families. She's my daughter. Her health comes first, and I thought you'd understand that. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying we're supposed to be partners. Partners communicate before making decisions that affect both of us. That's what we promised each other. Partners support each other without needing gold stars for every little thing they do." "That's not fair, Kerry. I've been nothing but supportive. But you're shutting me out, making all the decisions alone, and then getting angry when I don't immediately fall in line with plans I didn't know existed. Maybe if you'd ever had children, you'd understand the pressure I'm under." The words were out before Kerry could stop them, sharp and cutting like glass shards. The words hung in the air like poison gas. June's face went pale, all color draining away like water from a sink. "That's a low blow, and you know it." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. And you're right. I don't understand because Lisa Marie and I never had kids. She didn't want them, and I thought we had time to change her mind, to build that future. But that doesn't mean I can't support you and your daughter. It just means I need you to let me in, instead of shutting me out and then blaming me for not helping the way you want. June, please. I'm going for a drive. I need some space to think." He left, and Kerry stood in their kitchen crying, knowing she'd hurt him badly and not sure how to fix the damage she'd inflicted. She called her therapist for an emergency session the next day, desperate for guidance. "You're doing what you always did in your marriage to Ricky," Dr. Wright told her gently but firmly. "You're taking on everything yourself and then resenting everyone around you for not helping the way you need. But you're not asking for help, clearly. You're just expecting June to read your mind and then punishing him when he can't. I don't know how to ask. It feels like admitting I'm failing at something I should be able to handle. Asking for support isn't failure, it's partnership. That's what you and June promised each other. Equal partnership built on honesty and communication. You're reverting to old patterns because stress triggers old coping mechanisms." Kerry went home determined to apologize and communicate better, to rebuild what she'd damaged with careless words and thoughtless actions. But before she could, June's phone rang with news that stopped them both cold, another crisis piling onto the first like cars in a highway accident. Lisa Marie had filed a lawsuit against him, claiming he'd destroyed her reputation by telling mutual friends about the affair, turned their entire social circle against her, and was seeking $50,000 in damages that would bankrupt him. The timing couldn't be worse, couldn't be more calculated to cause maximum damage. June was already stressed about work, where budget cuts were threatening his position and forcing teachers to reapply for their own jobs, submitting portfolios like they were new hires. The uncertainty was killing morale. Now he had to deal with a frivolous lawsuit that would require legal fees he couldn't afford on a teacher's salary. "This is retaliation," June said, staring at the legal documents with disbelief and growing horror. She's angry that we're happy and she's not, so she's trying to destroy what we've built. She wants me to suffer the way she's suffering. We'll fight it together, Kerry said, taking his hand and squeezing hard. I'm sorry for what I said, for pushing you away, for not being the partner you deserve. I'm sorry too, for not being more understanding about the pressure you're under with your daughter. They held each other, but Kerry could feel the strain between them like a physical thing, a third presence in the room that pushed them apart, even as they tried to hold on. The lawsuit consumed June over the following 2 weeks. He became withdrawn, spending hours researching legal precedents and calling lawyers for consultations, each one telling him it would cost thousands to defend, even though the case had no merit. The stress manifested at school in ways he couldn't hide or control. He had a panic attack during class while teaching The Old Man and the Sea, his chest tightening and vision tunneling until he had to leave mid-lesson, stumbling into the hallway while students stared with concern and confusion. His principal called him in for a concerned conversation the next day. They didn't threaten his job directly, but June heard the unspoken warning crystal clear. If he couldn't handle the classroom during budget cuts when they needed reliable teachers, they'd have to reconsider his position. He came home that day and broke down completely, all the stress and fear overwhelming him at once, like a wave he'd been holding back finally crashing over him. Kerry found him at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs he couldn't control. "I can't do this," June whispered, his voice hollow and broken. "The lawsuit, the job stress, feeling like I'm failing you and your daughter and my students. It's too much. I'm drowning." Kerry sat beside him and took his hands in hers, holding on like she could anchor him to shore. "Then let's stop doing it alone. Let's actually be partners instead of two people drowning separately in the same house. I don't know how. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out, together. For real this time, with actual communication and honesty. No more shutting each other out. No more keeping score of who's more stressed or who's sacrificing more." They talked until dawn, really talked without defensiveness or blame or trying to win, laying everything bare in ways they hadn't since they first met in that coffee shop after their marriages exploded. Their fears, their insecurities, their needs, they'd been too scared to voice because voicing needs felt like admitting weakness. And when the sun came up, painting their kitchen in shades of gold and rose, they were exhausted, but closer than they'd been in weeks. "I think we need couples counseling," Kerry said. "Not because we're broken, but because I don't want to repeat the mistakes I made in my marriage. I can't lose you the way I lost myself with Ricky." "I agree. Let's find someone good and commit to the work." They started therapy the following week with a counselor who specialized in blended families and second marriages, who understood the unique challenges of building new lives from the wreckage of old ones. It changed everything, giving them tools and vocabulary for the feelings they'd been struggling to express. Gary learned to ask for help specifically instead of expecting June to intuit her needs. June learned to express his own needs without fear of being called selfish or uncaring. The lawsuit was dismissed 3 weeks later, when Lisa Marie's lawyer realized there was no case and convinced her to withdraw it rather than face sanctions for filing frivolous litigation. June's teaching position was saved when community members rallied, writing letters to the school board about his impact on their children, how he'd changed their lives and inspired them to love reading. 23 letters arrived from current and former students, from parents who'd watched their kids transform from reluctant readers to book lovers. And Kerry's cookbook released to strong reviews and modest but steady sales that promised a sustainable career beyond the restaurant. Publishers Weekly called it a love letter to family and food that transcends the genre. Her mother would have been proud. Her daughter gave birth to a healthy baby girl on a rainy spring morning in May, the world washed clean and new. Gary held her granddaughter and cried, June's arm around her shoulders, and felt hope bloom in her chest like flowers after winter. The baby had her daughter's eyes and Jake's nose, but her grip was all her own, strong and certain. They'd survived their first real crisis as a couple. And they'd done it together, scarred but standing, committed to the work of actually being partners instead of just saying the words. Chapter 10. Forgiveness and Forever. Kerry woke up one morning in late summer to find June already awake, sitting on the edge of their bed and staring out the window at the sunrise painting the sky in impossible colors, deep orange bleeding into pink, bleeding into gold. She touched his shoulder gently, feeling the warmth of his skin under her fingertips. "What are you thinking about?" "How different my life is from what I imagined when I was young. How grateful I am for that difference. How I thought I knew what happiness looked like, and I was completely wrong." Kerry moved to sit beside him, both of them watching the sunrise paint their bedroom in shades of new beginnings. They'd been living together for over 3 years now, had survived her daughter's pregnancy and June's lawsuit, and learned how to fight and make up and actually communicate through difficult things. "Do you ever think about them? But what could have been if they hadn't cheated?" "Sometimes. But I don't think I'd change anything even if I could." "Does that make me a terrible person? Grateful for betrayal because of where it led?" "No, it makes you honest." "I feel the same way. Ricky's betrayal destroyed me, but it also freed me to become who I actually am, instead of who I was pretending to be." They sat in comfortable silence until June spoke again, his voice thoughtful and careful. "I forgave her. Lisa Marie. A few weeks ago, actually. I realized I was carrying all this anger, and it wasn't hurting her. It was just poisoning me, making me bitter when I wanted to be grateful. So I let it go, just released it into the universe and decided to stop giving her space in my head." Kerry nodded slowly, understanding completely. "I think I've forgiven Ricky too. Not because he deserves it. I'm not even sure forgiveness is about what people deserve. But because I'm tired of letting what he did define my present. I want to be someone who was betrayed once, not someone who's still being betrayed every day by her own anger." "Exactly. The anger was becoming who I was, instead of just something that happened to me." Kerry's phone buzzed with a message from her editor, pulling her from the moment. The final book cover designs were ready for her approval. She opened the attachment and gasped. The cover was perfect, better than anything she'd imagined, showing a worn recipe box against a checkered tablecloth, vintage and modern at the same time. "June, look, my book is real. This is actually happening." He pulled her into his lap, both of them studying the cover design. "I'm so proud of you. Look at what you built from pain. You turned betrayal into art. We should celebrate. Let's throw a party at the restaurant. A proper book launch with everyone we love." They spent the next week planning a book launch party, sending invitations and coordinating with Bellamy to create a special menu inspired by recipes from the cookbook. The evening of the party, Kerry stood at the front of the restaurant's dining room, surrounded by staff and friends, and her daughter holding the baby, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the life she'd rebuilt. She talked about her parents' legacy, about the long road to this moment, about how destruction sometimes clears the way for growth. "This book wouldn't exist if my life hadn't fallen apart. I wouldn't have remembered these stories, wouldn't have written down my grandmother's recipes, wouldn't have learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is also the door to your best life. So thank you all for being part of this journey." Later, as they cleaned up, June pulled her aside. His hand was shaking slightly, and Kerry realized he was nervous. "Kerry Trent, I have something to ask you." He knelt in the kitchen, where they'd spent so many evenings cooking together, where they'd laughed and argued and built a life. He pulled out a simple silver ring with a small diamond that caught the light. "I want to spend whatever time we have building new memories. Will you marry me?" Kerry's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." They kissed while Bellamy whistled from across the kitchen and the remaining staff applauded. Kerry's daughter was crying happy tears, holding the baby, who seemed to understand something important was happening. They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the restaurant on a crisp October afternoon. Carrie's daughter officiated, her blessing bringing everyone to tears. She spoke about watching her mother rebuild after devastation, about learning that it's never too late to start over and find real love. Carrie wore a simple cream-colored dress and carried her mother's recipe cards tied with ribbon instead of a bouquet. June wore his navy suit and cried through his vows, voice breaking when he promised to always see her, always value her, always make space for her dreams alongside his own. He read a passage from his novel about second chances and love that heals, about finding home in unexpected places. She was the adjacent table, close enough to see everything, brave enough to act, and in watching him fail at love, she learned how to succeed at it herself. Ricky didn't attend. He'd remarried and moved to another state, starting over in his own way. But he'd sent a card wishing them well, acknowledging the pain he'd caused and expressing genuine hope for Carrie's happiness. It was something. Lisa Marie sent a gift, a set of vintage kitchen knives with a note for building something beautiful from the ruins. I'm glad you both found what I couldn't give you. The ceremony was joyful, celebrating not just love, but survival. When June kissed his bride, Carrie tasted possibility and promise, and everything good that comes after everything terrible. That night, they drove home as husband and wife, their last names officially hyphenated now, Trent Carter, a symbol of two broken people who became whole together, who chose to honor both their histories while building something entirely new. They sat in the driveway before going inside, holding hands and just breathing in the enormity of the moment. We made it, June whispered. We did. Any regrets? About any of it? Carrie thought seriously, looking back over the years from that first credit card statement to this moment. About Ricky's betrayal and the pain that followed. About discovering June and choosing to love again despite fear. About choosing herself over comfort and security. Not one. Every terrible moment led me exactly where I needed to be. I wouldn't change anything, not even the pain, especially not the pain. It taught me who I am. It taught me what I deserve. It taught me that I'm strong enough to survive anything. They walked into their house together, closing the door on the past and opening it to the future. Inside, Carrie's daughter was waiting with the baby, ready to babysit, while they left for a short honeymoon weekend. In the years that followed, Carrie's cookbook became a modest bestseller, finding its audience among readers hungry for stories about resilience and food and family. She wrote 2 more, each one deeper and more personal. June's novel was published and garnered critical acclaim, leading to a small but devoted readership and a teaching position at the local community college, where he could write more and teach students who actually wanted to learn. They taught workshops together about creativity after trauma, about rebuilding lives, about the courage it takes to start over. Carrie's daughter thrived, raising her baby with the support of family who loved her unconditionally. She eventually forgave Jake, though she never took him back, and built a beautiful life as a single mother who chose herself first. They grew old together, accumulating memories that mattered more than possessions. Whenever someone asked Carrie how she'd survived betrayal, how she'd built this beautiful life from such pain, she'd smile and say, I stopped fighting for a marriage that was already dead, and I started fighting for a life worth living. Because the greatest revenge wasn't bitterness or anger or making her ex-husband suffer. It was building something so full of love and joy and meaning that the past became just a stepping stone instead of a prison. Carrie learned that the table next to betrayal could become the table of salvation, and sometimes the person sitting adjacent to your pain is exactly who you need to find. She learned that destruction is sometimes just making space for construction, that endings are also beginnings, that the worst day of your life might also be the first day of your real life, if you're brave enough to walk through the fire and see what emerges on the other side. And she learned, most importantly, that she was enough, had always been enough, would always be enough, not for everyone, but for the right person. And that was everything.